So we're going to pick up where we left off at failure. I'm alone again. I gotta work on this alone thing. I guess YouTubing is a good solution. I thought maybe it wasn't, but I think it's like therapy for me. And plus I get to read my books. I want to know if you can live with failure, yours and mine, and still stand on the edge of the lake and shout to the silver full moon, yes. On my 40th birthday, I made a vow. I promised myself that in the second half of my life, I would make only real mistakes. Real mistakes are genuine errors in judgment, choices that can be seen, with the knowledge of hindsight, not to have been the best. It's not that I hadn't made lots of real mistakes in my first 40 years, but I was frustrated less with those honest failures born of inexperience or lack of information than with the mistakes I'd made because I'd second-guessed initial judgments. Several years ago, I was asked to co-facilitate an international conference with two women I did not know. I had heard of their work and read a book one of them had authored. During the conference preparations, I had an uneasy feeling which I expressed to both the organizer and the co-leaders. We all worked in very different ways, and we seemed to lack clear common vision of the conference's purpose and structure. They seemed unconcerned, and I wondered if I would withdraw altogether, but I was plagued by doubts. These women were experienced conference facilitators. Surely they would sense if something was not in alignment with our preparations. Perhaps I was just feeling nervous about co-facilitating. I usually worked alone. Maybe I was just reluctant to trust others, or was trying to be in control. Maybe I needed to learn something about working in a team with structure that was more fluid and less predictable than I was used to. It was too late to back out. As 300 people assembled, it quickly became clear just how much we, the facilitators, lacked a common vision. Different participants had arrived with incomparable expectations. With no clear structure, method, or purpose, the other two facilitators and myself were unable to work together to stop the most vocal participants from simply bullying everyone else into following their agenda. I need some drink. Okay. Imitation. Stop. My friends and I now refer to this weekend as the conference from hell. What is difficult to acknowledge is that I saw this mistake coming and second-guessing myself went against my own intuitive judgment. It wasn't that I had not seen the truth. I had, but I had failed to find the courage to act on it. Of course, my intuition can be wrong, but making a wrong decision, acting on an intuition that is inaccurate, is a real mistake. One I can live with more easily than the mistake of failing to act on what, to the best of my ability, I know. Some deny failure, insisting that there are no mistakes, but the inability to admit failure robs us of the chance to learn. To learn, we must be willing to make mistakes, and we must be willing to our own mistakes and learn from them. This is hard for those of us who struggle with our perfection. I like to learn things that I know I can do well, preferably perfectly quickly. This unwillingness to make mistakes has stopped me in the past from learning new languages. There's simply no way to learn a new language as an adult without making thousands of mistakes, as we are readily apparent. And sometimes that's very entertaining to those who know the language. That's how we learn, by trying, failing, and receiving correction, and by trying again. We all have different areas where it's hard for us to let our mistakes be seen. For me, it is languages, because I'm attached to my sense of self as intellectually competent. It's just simple self-importance. I hate sounding stupid. However, never having identified myself as someone with athletic ability, I'm fine with learning a physical skill, though I will necessarily make hundreds of mistakes and appear awkward as part of the learning process. When a spiritual teacher nods sagely and says, "There are no mistakes," alluding to a grand design and a higher power that is somehow in charge of all that is happening, it's tempting to agree. There are times when a mistake results in a chain of events that lead to wonderful outcomes well beyond those reasonably expected according to a random chance. There are some scientists that assert that the very evolutionary process of creation, from the conscious of survival-enhancing genetic mutations or mistakes, defies the laws of averages and could not have happened by random chance. I have lived a full life of this sense of unfolding magic and have often felt guided by something larger than myself, sometimes through and often despite my mistakes. When I made the mistake of agreeing to go away for one last weekend with a man I did not intend to see again, I was introduced to a friend of his, a wonderful woman who runs a retreat center that became home for my workshops and personal haven for much of my writing for many years. This does not change the fact that my choice that weekend was a mistake, one that caused great pain for the man I was with and resulted in the loss of the opportunity for ongoing friendship between us. I did feel guided by the magic and mystery of the interconnectedness of life to what became an important relationship and place in my life. But many other decisions I have made have not resulted in the unfolding of clearly fortunate events. And surely the divine, if it does work with purpose in our lives, is not dependent upon, but works through our choices, good and bad. I got spoken by. I'm probably going to finish this book tonight again. I've read this one like 14 times. Also, don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff. It's a really good series, too. There's 2 more books to this one, though, that I have out in the truck, and I'm waiting to read them because I wanted to refresh on this one before I started those ones. So, maintaining that there are no mistakes, that all things work out for the best, assumes a perspective that is wider, deeper, and longer than any to which we as human beings have access. It may be well true, although I cannot see how it could be argued that things worked out for the best for 6 million Jews in the World War II. Such a position denies or glibly, I don't know that word, dismisses as necessary as the very real and unavoidable suffering that happens as a result of human failure. Worse, it suggests that we are not fully responsible for our choices because things are somehow predetermined. While this may be momentarily comforting, we simply have no way of knowing that that is true. I acknowledge and am often awed by the mystery that always holds and often guides me. This does not mean that I do not make mistakes and that I cannot fail. Refusing to acknowledge failure is often an attempt to avoid the paralysis of shame. Many of us were raised or educated by people who try to make us feel guilty when we made a mistake, hoping that the fear of being shamed would help us avoid future failure. It didn't. It didn't work. We cannot live fully and avoid mistakes, so to avoid the paralysis of pain and shame, we narrow our lives to those things we already know and deny the mistakes that happen. I was amazed to find how deeply rooted in me this fear of shame of failure. When my elder son Brendan was having difficulty in high school going to the library to read instead of attending classes because he was bored, you see, I want you to know I didn't fail to have a brilliant child. I just failed to have one who could endure the plodding rigors of the public school system. Hello, that was me. I was always in trouble, but I made straight A's. All right. I was amazed at the terror I felt when it became apparent that he might fail a grade. All the nightmare associations from my school days came to the fore. People who fail grade drop out, are unemployable, and die on the streets. Those who fail a grade are marked for life as lacking, unworthy, and unacceptable, shamed. It is amazing how strong these fears are within me, even though I can now see that they are unfounded. How many times since you have become an adult has someone asked you what mark you have received in ninth grade geography? Even now, when I'm anxious about something, anything, the most common dream I have is being back in school, about to take an exam, as I realize that I have not attended classes or studied. This, despite the fact that I have never come close to failing an exam in my life, and there was my son not attending classes or studying, living out my worst nightmare. Okay. How many pages do I have on failure? We still have 2 pages. Well, actually, a page and a half. I failed to finish this chapter this evening, but I will. Another time, so come back. I always show up for the people that I care about. Always. Thanks for coming. I'll be back soon.